on homework 4. No, homework 5. And this is problem number 2. So here's your original circuit. And before you start actually minimizing the circuit, there's something you can do. And so the trick to this is to, as soon as you see a blank lead like this, you know this is a short, right? So I want to look at the loop it makes because I'm going to find out something really important. Because of loop rule says that V must add to 0 in any loop. And so if there's ever only one resistor in a loop, that resistor you instantly know the voltage is 0 and the current is 0. So right off the bat, and this is resistor number 5. Let me label these real quick. R5, R4, R1, R3, R2. Sorry. Okay. So right off the bat, I know a bunch of stuff about resistor 5. I'm actually done with it, right? I know that its voltage has to be 0, and I know its current has to be 0. Again, how do I know it has to be 0? Because of loop rule. Look at this loop. It's the only resistor, and we know that the sum of voltages in any loop has to be 0, so its voltage must be 0. And V equals IR says I must also be 0 too. So this right-hand side, I can go ahead and finish them because then there's only one other loop, and in this one other loop, I only have one resistor. So I know that the voltage in the battery has to be the same as this resistor because the sum of voltages in any loop equals 0. So that tells me this guy is 32 volts also. And so I can come down to R4, put in 32 volts, okay? Now, if I know the voltage and I know the resistance, I can say V for 4 has to equal I times R for 4, and so that's 32 volts equals I times the resistance I'm given, 2200 ohms, in which case then you can solve for I, which has to be 2200 over 32. over 32, which then you can go ahead and solve for. It's 0.0 or something. Okay, so the right-hand side is done now, right? We've completed that. We've gotten everything we need for R4 and R5. We haven't finished with the battery yet, but we have to go back to this side of the circuit now. So this side of the circuit we actually need to minimize. So I'm going to minimize that circuit. All right, so this is just the left half. Note, you would have the right half drawn. I'm just drawing the left-hand side, actually. I'll just go ahead and do it so there's no. Okay, so the left hand I minimize now. So this is R1 and R3, which are 790 ohms and 8600 ohms. And then this is R2 still, which is 1000 ohms. So I've got one more minimization to do, actually 2 more. So now I'm going to add these 2 in parallel, right? And so if I add those in parallel, my new circuit looks like that. Right? And so this new resistance is going to be our total, which is R1 times R3 over R1 plus R3, which will give you a new resistance of R13. This is still R2, but now I'm going to add these 2 in series, so I've got one more minimization, which then looks like so now I just have the left-hand side with only one resistor, which is R1, 2, 3. And to get that, you had to take our total for a series, because R1 and R1, R3, and R2 are in series together. And so R13 that you found from this value, right, is going to be here plus R2 to give you the total resistance here. Okay, once you have that guy, then you use V equals IR, right? Because you know that in this loop, if this is 32 volts, this total resistor you have, R1, 2, 3, has to be 32 volts. And so V equals IR for 1, 2, 3. All right, and then you're going to plug in for your R, this R total value you found, for your V, 32 volts, and that'll tell you the current coming out of that junction from the battery. So that's that I you just solved for here, is here. Well, that's going to be the same as the I going through R2. So now you've got the I for R2, you've got the resistance for R2, and so you can use V2 equals IR2 and find the voltage that's going through R2. And so that circuit's done. So now if you know this voltage that you solve for here, you know that the V through 1, 3, this resistor, has to equal the voltage in the battery, 32 volts, minus the voltage you just solved for 2. That's a V2, I swear. All right? So now I solve for this voltage from that, and I know then that the voltage I find for this resistor, if I go back to here, is going to be the same voltage here and here, because these are in parallel. So they're going to have the same voltage each that I found here. So now I can take that voltage and the resistance to find the current through here, that voltage or resistance to find the current through here. And now I found everything except for I need to go through the battery. So I know VBAT, I know the current coming through here because I found the current going through R4. And now I know that the current here is the same as the current here because the current going into a junction has to equal the current going out. And so the I found for I2, right, plus the I found for I4 is going to equal the total I through the battery. All right? Because current going into a junction equals current going out, so your I2 plus your I4 equals that I total. And then once you have I total, VBAT equals IR total, right? And you plug in 32, the I you found here, and then solve for your total resistance in your circuit.